What makes someone a balanced leader? Hey there, this is your friend and guide, Caroline. On today's Balanced Leader, my incredible guest and I share strategies to help you lead with confidence, stay resilient, and avoid burnout. This isn't just about leadership, it's about thriving holistically, in mind, body, and spirit. Ready to recalibrate? Well, let's dive in and create the balanced life you deserve. Welcome to today's edition of today's Balanced Leader. I'm so excited with today's host. From a gas station clerk to CEO, Brittany Rogar has turned every hardship into a launch pad. After growing up around addiction, loss, and instability, she has built a multi-six-figure business from scratch and did it without watering down who she is. You're going to find out that secret. Today, she's the CEO of SKF Practice Solutions and the host of Dental Decoders podcast. And whether you find Brittany on stage or behind the scenes, she is a pillar of resilience, purpose, and real talk, guiding others to rewrite their stories with strength, strategy, and heart. I want you guys to know, I know Brittany, she's not here for fluff or formulas. She's here to remind us that authenticity isn't a liability. It is actually your superpower, and we're going to talk more about that later. So if you've ever felt like you had to tone it down, hide your story, or wait until you had it all together to lead, this episode is your wake-up call. Brittany, thank you so much for being here.
I am so glad to be here, and just listening to you read the bio, I'm like, oh, you just make everything sound so sweet. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, well, and you've accomplished so much. Like when you and I know each other a little bit, I mean, I don't know your full story, but it's just the journey that you've done. I've even reached out to you to say, what the hell? How'd you grow your business so quickly? But I love how you haven't lost who you are. And I think that's what so many people do. And it's a bit of the journey that I talk about. But I love that your story seems to be very unapologetic, right? And you've never apologized for the lessons that you've learned, right? So there's been lessons that have really shaped your journey. So let's get right into it, because I know this is going to be one that people are going to get some beautiful golden nuggets out of. So I want to start with kind of along those lines. I want you to share a moment when perhaps it was when you were a gas station clerk or you learned early on in your life. When was it that you realized that resilience wasn't just survival, but it was truly your launching pad?
So I love this question in particular because resilient is a word that I would definitely use to describe myself. You said it in my intro even. It is definitely a word that I use to describe myself. And for the longest time, the word I used was stubborn. And then I I switched it up to sound a little bit more polished. But I mean, also stubborn. But for me, I remember all throughout my childhood, we talked about how I grew up kind of in the throes of dealing with parents who had struggled with addiction. So I had to demonstrate resilience pretty early on. But the first moment that I really remember being like, okay, I am so stuck in everything that I'm doing and I don't know what to do, was when I was actually working at the gas station. We have like a chain of gas stations in my area that are like the fancy gas station, and they have a kitchen. So I was running the kitchen at this gas station, and I was working third shift, and I had just found out that I was pregnant for the first time. And I got my paycheck. I'm looking at my like pay stub, and I'm like, how on earth am I going to be able to afford another human being when I'm scrounging for quarters in my car to put gas in my tank right now? So what can I do to make a change? And I had not seen that particularly a lot in life because my parents, like I said, had struggles with addiction. My whole family had kind of the mentality of like, I'm going to go to work, I'm going to punch out, I'm going to go home. And then that's when life starts, is once I've punched out. And everyone kind of worked in the gas station field or in the outlet mall or in these types of areas. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But I just knew that for me, that wasn't going to be a great fit. So I went online and I sent in my resume, which I didn't even have one made at that point, to all of these organizations that I was not qualified at all for. And I was just going to shoot my shot and see what happened. And I landed my first role in the dental industry, which changed my entire life. It led to me eventually creating this beautiful business and launching the speaking career and writing the books and all of the things, just because I had the audacity to send in my resume for these positions that I met none of the criteria for.
Can we pause for just a second? Because if Brittany's story has you reflecting on your own life, maybe you've been playing small, shrinking your truth, or pouring from an empty cup. And I want to invite you to my Summer Soul Reset. This isn't your typical hustle harder program. It's a 6-week reclamation for high-achieving women leaders, change makers, and entrepreneurs who are ready to recalibrate their nervous system, ditch the burnout cycle, and lead with clarity, calm, and courage without sacrificing success. We're going to start soon, and the doors are open now. You'll get the tools, practices, and support to finally lead your life and business from your authentic, unapologetic self. Because your authenticity, that's your leadership advantage. Check the show notes for the link. All right, let's dive back in. I love that. Yeah, and you talk about addiction, but there's that piece about loss. So there's that instability, and I feel like in today's world, so this is perfect timing. People are in that same situation right now, but for me, it feels like it's broader, it's more people just because of the economy. Things are really tough right now. People are losing jobs. Housing market is ridiculous, right? So it's a perfect time for us to really talk about some of the lessons that you learn, because I often find, yes, the times are different and things may be different, but that resilience, that courage is really something that you have to take along with you, because life is a journey and it's not going to be sweet and easy all the time, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
when I think about it, you grew up in a lot of instability
Mm-hmm.
and loss. So, using that word courage, how did you find that courage to believe in your future when circumstances told you a different story? Or did you just tell yourself, I have this child now, and I have to grow up real quickly? What did it look like for you?
So I would like to start by saying I still have not grown up. So that's still a work in progress. But I will say that growing up the way that I did, it was taught to me at a very young age. And I will say that there were some incredibly, like, there were a lot of silver linings that came from growing up the way that I did, even though it's not ideal. I learned very early on, that things are not going to be handed to me, and they are not going to go the way that I expect. So from the first time I set a goal for myself, I learned that I need to have a plan A, B, C, D, and probably E, because the first few times are probably not going to go how I plan. I need to make sure that I have these like backups in place for when things don't go the way that they're supposed to. Now as an adult, I don't have to map out each and every step along the way. I have just learned how to pivot on the fly a little bit more. But going into things knowing that the first way is probably not the right way, because no matter what you do, like if you try something once, it's never your best shot. Like you're making small improvements along the way. And having that mentality from a young age, I think, made it really easy to step into this like courage as an adult, because what is the worst thing that's going to happen? It's never going to be as bad as some of the things that I've already experienced in my life. So at that point in time, like, why not give it a shot and see what happens? I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I want to expand on that one a little bit. So maybe give our listeners an example of a moment when that, I'm going to call it authenticity, felt risky. Yet
Mm.
you leaned in and learned anyways. What happened next? Maybe give us a little example of something that you went through.
Yeah. So when we were talking at the very beginning of the episode, you mentioned that like I hadn't changed through the process, and like I'm still very authentic to myself. And I love hearing that. And I also know that at the beginning of the venture, I was dramatically less authentic than I am now. So instead of changing away from who I am as the journey has gone on, I've shifted more into who I am. And that is because when I first started, when I was dabbling with the idea of starting a business, I was told many, many times that I was not going to succeed in the industry that I'm in because I'm in a very conservative industry and I have wildly painted nails and I like to dye my hair pink every once in a while and I'm covered in tattoos and I curse like a sailor. They're like, this is not going to be it for you. But that's where my passion was. So for me to try and start this business being told from every outside force this is not going to work, I tried to water myself down quite a bit when I first started the business. And I was trying to people please and be exactly the type of consultant and coach that everybody wanted. And I was kind of like a chameleon. And I showed up different for each of like my first probably 10 clients. I was a different version of me. And it wasn't until that I stopped trying to fit into that box where I was like, you know what? These first 10, 15 clients, they sucked my soul. Like it was very draining to have to go in and pretend to be somebody else every day. And then I got to the point where I was like, okay, let me try this little science experiment here where I show up completely unedited, just very much real me and see what happens. And that was that person that I tried this experiment on. We're still in contact. They're still reaching out to me with questions and we still have a relationship, but they've referred so much business to me because they're not the clients and people in general can tell when you're not being authentically yourself. When you're trying to fit into somebody else's mold, you can sense that. It doesn't feel real, and real connection is really what you're looking for in any type of sales type of engagement. You want to actually know the person that you're working with. So once I stopped trying to fit into this box that was created by other people and didn't serve me was when all of the word of mouth referrals came in. That was when the business took off. That's when it boomed. And I was able to partner with other people who are very like-minded to me in this industry as well, because even though I was told all the time that like this isn't going to fly here, and I had this mental loop that I was telling myself of dentistry, no tattoos, no piercings, no nails, no hair, it's a lie. And there are a lot of other people out there like me, and there are dentists who are getting younger and younger and that are covered in tattoos now too. And those are the people that want to work with me. And I love that I found that group of people because it's been so rewarding to watch this kind of more edgy side evolve inside the industry and be able to make genuine relationships with other people in my industry and all of the clients.
I so love that. And I love that because I'm feeling it internally because I when I worked in HR, I had the exact same thing where I was that chameleon, right? Where you had to have a professional face. You could never show emotion. You had to be the corporate face, right? And there was always that struggle internally
Mm-hmm.
around I had to do this, but it didn't feel right. And at one point, I remember, as you mature, because you're minding your p's and q's a lot of times. At least I did early on in my career because I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to grow. But at some point, I just knew this wasn't going to be the career that I wanted unless I could be a little bit more authentic. And I would say I'm a heck of a lot more authentic because I still have more work to do. But it's hard to shed that. It's hard to shed that belief that you've lived with and that others have put on you for so long. Hence what I do today, hence what you do today
Mm-hmm.
around speaking to people to finally say, listen, and I often said to people, listen, the one problem with the corporate world, well, there's a number of problems with the way the corporate world runs, but one in particular is I often used to say, I hire people for their strengths, and the minute I bring them in, I'm focused on their weaknesses. There's something
Ooh.
broken with that.
Mm.
We're trying to push you. Maybe you're not good at this. And so we try to develop, develop, develop. Why don't I not develop you on that and hire somebody else who's good at that? Because I really want to highlight and see you blossom under the strengths and the reason that I hired you, because then you get to be your authentic self.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so, what helped you shed that? Because I feel like I know a ton of people that feel that they're stuck in that world And even in the HR space, there were a lot of times where confidential stuff, you can only share so much, and I get
Hmm.
that, right?
Hmm.
But there were times where even I would say to my team or to my colleagues, listen, I'm not happy with what's happening either, but it's the direction the business is going in. And just that one line, they felt comfortable to open up
Hmm.
and we could have that dialogue so we could proceed and move forward in that direction. So, what helped you to shed it? Because I'm sure so many people are wanting to shed that part
Yeah.
of them.
So I'm not gonna lie, it's not totally gone. There's always still this whisper in the back of my head of like, you're not good enough for this, or they are looking for X, Y, and Z, and you're ABC. And I just try and tune that out as much as I can, because now I'm to a point where I have the real world evidence. I have the backing, I have the Google reviews, I have the relationships, I have the booming business that speaks for itself. And I try and bring myself back into that every day. And the way that I bring myself back into that is doing affirmations in the morning that remind myself every day. I do the embarrassing thing of sitting in front of the mirror and looking myself in the eyes and repeating the statements over and over again, so I actually can rewire my brain that I am amazing and the right people want to work with me. But before we got to the point where we're at now, where I can just remind myself, it really was just that science experiment. And that, I think it kind of ties back into that resilience. Like, what's the worst thing that could happen? I've been through worse. So worst case scenarios, they don't like me and they don't hire. Okay, they don't hire me then I will have more opportunities for the next people. And I think it was really just about taking a gamble on myself and thinking truly, like, what is the absolute worst thing that's going to happen? I am not going to have to file for bankruptcy if this one client doesn't like me. I am not going to lose my home if this one client doesn't like me. And I was fortunate that that first experiment of trying to just be my authentic self wound up being successful. If it hadn't been, I would obviously continue trying, maybe at smaller scale. And I think if I were to give advice to someone who is a little bit uncomfortable with starting to show up a little bit more authentically, just take small, like your one small statement that you implemented. If you can find one small way to show up, if it's a pink jacket instead of a black one, or if it's lending a little bit more authenticity in these difficult conversations that we're having with the people that we're working with, even those little tiny baby steps, and then watch how that affects your environment. If I show up in pink and I'm still the same boss that I was yesterday when I wore my black blazer, it's going to help me rewire my brain and how I can show up, and it's not going to make that ginormous of an impact of the environment that I'm in, but it is going to make a big impact on my brain and how I can show up. And then I can get a little bit more daring and a little bit more authentic over time as I start to ease myself into the process.
Absolutely love those suggestions. And I actually have an affirmation that I put right
Yay.
on my screen so that I can read it. And it starts with I trust in divine timing.
I love that.
Right?
Mine is my vision board. So
I
I
love,
just want to share that I'm very in alignment with you right now.
right? Well, and I think that's the other piece that I've been hiding is not sharing the things that I've done, right? Because I've lived the bulk of my life a certain way that society approved of.
Mhm.
And then when I burnt out, I realized that was kind of my calling card to change things out. And now I often say to women, I don't want you to have to get to the burnt out stage or
Yeah.
the fall apart stage or whatever you want to call it for you to realize that you don't have to live that way, that that's not, that's, that's a belief that we carry that we can get rid of. And so
Hmm.
I think it's more around, to your point, to showing it because there are so many people aching to see it. And I'll give you an example. When I was in HR, when I burnt out, so just had gone through COVID, and in the HR world, we were responsible for all the changes and managing
Hmm.
people, and we were deemed essential. So we were open and dealing with people who didn't want to come to work. And so we often joked where we'd go on calls and we're like, hey, we worked 85 days straight. Hey, we worked 125 days straight. It was like a badge of honor. But between that, then losing my father, going through a nasty divorce, I couldn't get out of bed one day.
Hmm.
And I think, the point of where do you kind of finally say enough is enough? And how do you set those healthy boundaries? And it took a long time for me to go on a journey, a healing journey. And I've tried so many different things and there's so much out there. But that's the piece I think you and I love to shout from the rooftops now. And like I said, I'm getting better at it, is showing, because it doesn't take a ton of work sometimes. It's simple things.
Mm-hmm.
Like you talked about looking in the mirror. And I often talk about we would never speak to our friend the way we would speak to
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. And so look in the mirror, look right into your eyes and actually talk as if it's your friend. And it's amazing the conversation you'll have. Mel Robbins high fives herself in the mirror every day before she goes out. I do, I'm actually posting on social media kind of my non essentials before my feet even hit the ground in the morning. Today it's going to be around intention. What's my intention for today? How am I going to be present? How am I going to show up in this world? That's important to me. And I think just little things like that. It doesn't have to be a massive change. So I love how you say you can just try little things, because there are people out there, and I'm digressing because what I wanted to share was when I went on a leave of absence after all those things that had happened to me because I was ill, when I came back 3 months later, I had so many other HR people reach out to me personally and say, I can't tell you how much you've done for us collectively as an HR team, because we never thought we were able to do that. That's not something
Mm-hmm.
that's available to us. And you, particularly at that point, I was a director, to be able to stop, take time, and heal yourself so you could come back better was just such. All of a sudden it was like all these people are like, wow, we can
Mm-hmm.
actually do that and take 10 for ourselves. And so, I think when we start to show more of that in for people to see, it almost gives them a little bit of permission, right? Where they
Yeah.
start to hold on to that person and go, yeah, you know what? I can do that. So, and I think life and leadership often present really tough decisions for us. So maybe, Brittany, what is something in your life that has happened, maybe a moment where you had to live through a tough decision, and how did you lead with both strategy and heart? Because I know that can be tough sometimes, and it can be business and personal, right? The combination of the two sometimes.
Yeah. So many different times come to mind that I'm struggling to pick just one, but I will go with I will go with the decision to leave my job. I had been with a company for 5 or 6 years by the time that I had finally left. And at the time, I was in my early 20s. That was dramatically longer than I had ever worked for one company before. And I had sworn up and down forever that I was going to, like, I'm going to die in my office chair and, like, I'm going to retire here. This is how it's going to be. And I had to make the tough decision when I realized that so I'm a big core values girly. It's the fundamental core of who I am, and I share core values with my team every day, and I'm very reliant on them, and I always have been, without being able to necessarily put a pinpoint in what I was looking for. It was making sure that I was a core value match is what it wound up being. And when I realized that this company and I no longer had the same core values, I had to decide if it was time for me to stay or go. And I was high up in the ranks of this company at that point. I had a lot of people who were depending on me, and not a lot of people who could, in my mind at the time, do what I was doing. And I didn't want to put the owner of the company in a difficult position. I didn't want to put my direct supervisor in an uncomfortable position where now all their goals are blown up because I'm leaving. Didn't want to put the people below me in a dangerous spot because they didn't then have that leadership. Even further than that, when I got home at the end of the day, the job was paying for the life that I was living with my husband and my kids and my family. And we were young parents at the time. And there were just so many different working pieces. And I was very concerned about the decision to leave my job because, from a logistics standpoint, I wasn't sure that I was going to be able to get that pay and that freedom that I had in the role anywhere else, but I was exhausted. It didn't feel like I was getting the recognition that I had needed. I didn't feel like our core values aligned any longer. And I knew that I needed to do something. Now, what I was being called to do was start my own business at that time, but I was still very much dealing with that insecurity of not being enough, the imposter syndrome, all of the things. So I wound up taking a different position at that time. But I had to, before I could actually make the decision if I should go or if I should stay, it came down to me really battling my heart versus my head a little bit, because my heart said, goodbye. My head said it's going to mess up everybody's whole entire life if I leave. And what I think is so funny about this in hindsight is I finally did make the decision to leave, obviously. And my last 2 weeks there was so difficult and I was so emotional, and like it was wild. But as soon as I left, they hired somebody into the position. They undid a ton of the work that I had spent years doing, and they're still alive and thriving now. Like, they're okay. And I put so much weight and heaviness on myself on if I could make this decision or not, because I was so concerned about everybody else, that I not once took a second to go, like, how am I feeling about this? How will I feel if I stay or if I go? And I think it's very fun to look at it now, and I'm still in communication with my former supervisor there, and to see how they've grown, blossomed, and changed because I left, because my heart wasn't in it anymore. So not only did it help me a ton because I'm on this new trajectory, but also it helped them that I, when my heart wasn't in it, I got out of the way and let somebody step in whose heart was in it, because then they were able to bloom as well. So heart and head kind of battled a little bit on that one, and it took a lot of introspective work and realizing that I can't people please everybody, or I'm ultimately not people pleasing myself, and I'm the one who has to live with the decision at the end of the day. So kind of went back and forth on that, but that was a huge decision for me, and I'm very, very glad I made it. But in the moment was probably one of the most difficult decisions I've ever had to make.
Yeah, probably one of the scariest ones too.
Mm-hmm.
Because a lot of times, excuse me, a lot of times we talk about, and we'll talk a little bit about your core values. I don't know if you
Mm-hmm.
want to share them, but I made the same decision, right? So after I went back after my leave of absence, that's when because I was the same. I planned to retire there. I planned to finish my career there. I was there almost 12 years. I loved the people that I got to work with, but it just didn't align with my values anymore, because now all of a sudden parts of me started to become more important. My
Mm-hmm.
health became more important. Losing my dad, and I've shared this on my podcast previously, I looked at legacy, and my dad had left behind a phenomenal legacy that I got to see and hear from other people. It still chokes me up. And I thought, well, what's my legacy going to be? I don't want my children to think, well, mom worked a lot of hours. She worked really long. She was a hard worker. That is not the legacy that I want to
Mm-mm.
leave behind. And so, I don't know if you're open to sharing what your core values are, Brittany, but I think sometimes people need to go back to the basics of what's important to them, because as much as everybody says life is short, I don't think they live in the moment of life is short, because it really is.
I completely agree. And the time that I started thinking about core values, and I wasn't putting the name core values on it at the time,
Right.
but was in 2019 when I lost my best friend unexpectedly, 25 days after her 25th birthday. And something about loss at that young of an age really put things into perspective to me as well, where I needed to decide what was going to be important to me. Because yeah, at the time I was doing 60-hour weeks. I'd work at work and then I'd bring my laptop and I'd work at home. And I'm not going to say it's perfect now that I'm an entrepreneur either. I probably still put in too many hours, but I'm doing it with integrity. I'm doing it in a way that aligns and that I know is supporting the things that I want for my family. And I think that's when it started to be important to me as well. So I appreciate you sharing the story with your dad, because it is very similar to mine and it really resonates with me as well. My personal core values are sacred. Just kidding. They're very,
And
very important
not
to me.
everybody
The
wants to share. That's why I was like, you
no,
don't have
no,
to.
that's okay. I don't mind sharing. So integrity is the first one, because I want, for a long time, I grew up in a way that I saw a lot of things going on that were shady and sketchy, and we learned to lie at a very young age. And it was something that was taught to me by my parents, is that we can lie about these things so that we can get this end result that we want. And let me tell you, that's a difficult habit to break. But integrity is now one of my main core values. And it is something that I remind myself of every single day, is that being, doing everything that I do in integrity is just so very important to me. Authenticity is another one, which I am sure is very surprising. We actually just added that into our business core values as well. Earlier this year, we launched it as a new core value as well, because I realized that each person in my team, allowing them to show up in an authentic way, made our company so much more strong. Kind of back to what you were saying, where we were trying to force people into the wrong roles and do the things that they didn't like, but that wound up actually being all of my team superpower, as well as being authentic. Compassion is another one. Everything I do through a lens of love. I care about people in a way that I don't want to say is scary, because I'm definitely not like out here stalking people, but I care about people in a way that's like deep, authentic, genuine, and true, to the point where, like, I have in my contacts in my phone, I do this in my CRM for business as well, but like I'll take little notes about people. Like, I'll notice your coffee order and I'll put it in your contact card, or you'll tell me your anniversary is coming up and I'll put it in your contact card. And I make note of all these little things because I just deeply love everybody that comes into my space, and I want to make sure that I'm showing them that in the way that makes sense. I have their Enneagram numbers and their love languages and all the things in their contact cards. So that way I can just make sure that I'm supporting them in the way that is most meaningful to them. So yeah, those are my core values, and a really long, rambly way to tell you the answer to that
Love
question. But
that.
I live and breathe them every single day. And then my company has 6 core values, and they're all very in alignment with that as well. And we built those as a team, so that way everybody knows. Every single day we go over our core values in our morning huddle as well, and everybody knows them. Everybody knows what they mean, and we talk about how we show up and live those every day too.
Yeah, and thank you for the examples, because I think the
Mm-hmm.
examples help people, because you often see when you walk into businesses, and I'm pointing at a wall, core
Yeah.
values on the
Uh-huh.
wall,
I
right?
knew exactly what you were pointing at too.
Right? Here's my core values.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they come up during an interview, right? I remember when I went in for an interview, they handed me the values and they were on this laminated sheet, and which one resonates most with you and how would you bring it to life and things like that. But I find sometimes people lose sight of the core values because they get in that grind, right? So I think giving them examples is a perfect way, because I'm big on the CRM as well, where what's your partner's name, what are your kids' names, right? When's your birthday, those kinds of
Mm-hmm.
things that are small, but like people are sometimes, how do you remember everybody's birthday? Well, I just put it on my calendar and
Write
I
it
add it
down.
as an
Yeah,
annual
exactly.
reminder, and it's not a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's something important, to your point, when you care about people, and we're people that genuinely love the people that come into our world. And I think that's so important. But when you think about your business, so I love that you've got yours and then your business that it's beautiful that you created it with your team, because that doesn't happen very often, right? They're cascaded
Mm-hmm.
down. I think it empowers because you're bringing them along, just like with anything else. They're bought into them now, as opposed to they're on the
Mm-hmm.
wall.
Yep.
How do you, because now you've got your core values, but even as leaders, you're an owner of a business. How do you then look at your core values, but every day lead with heart in a results oriented world? Like, maybe you can
Mm.
give us a real life example of that.
Yeah. So I am systems and operations is my jam. That's what I did in my previous life. That was my title. It's what I do now as well. And I'm a numbers person. I'm a Virgo, so I really like structure and order. And I also am very true to these core values. So what I did was I created the foundation of our company to be built on these core values in a way that the KPIs that we measure every month to actually physically measure our success are rooted directly into those core values. I actually just did a whole hour-long talk about this last month, about how dental practices can build KPIs based on their core values. And it's actually really cool, all of the creative ways that we can measure our success and our core values, but also tie those into like the fundamental business KPIs. Like if one of our core values is like customer appreciation or customer satisfaction or whatever we want to call it, whatever verbiage we're using that's similar to that, our production number or our amount of money that we're getting paid each month, regardless of what business you're in, should be directly correlated to that. Because if our customers are satisfied, they're giving us reviews, they're repeat customers, they're coming back in the door. So we can take any core value and we can break that down into actual success metrics that we can track on the spreadsheets every month. And we can talk about in those meetings and visually see how we're meeting business goals and how they align with those core values.
I love that. And I just made myself a note that that was an episode, podcast episode, which we'll talk about your podcast in a minute. Okay.
It's actually like a live talk, but it is
Oh,
going to be on the podcast coming up soon too. So
okay. So I'm going to have to grab
spoiler.
that from you and share it with
Yeah.
my leaders. So I do generally two when I focus on goals or KPIs. I do one year end, beginning of year, and then I do one mid year. So I just did one. And it's because I find a lot of businesses, the goal is a number. It's sales, it's
Mhm.
percentage. To me, that's a result.
Yep.
That's not a goal. And so I walked through on that episode, how, if that is given to you by a business, how do you turn that into something that you can actually break down
Mhm.
and embrace so that, again, that result happens. And I talked to about personal, like if you had one of your goals was to lose 20 pounds. This is the example I give. That is an outcome. The reason you want to do X, Y, and Z is because you want to live healthier. You want to maybe be able to do more things, etc. The
Mhm.
losing the weight is a goal. And if you set that goal at 20 pounds, what if you lose 10? Is that a win or a loss? Right? So it's
Mhm.
really looking at things differently. And so I love that and would love to make sure I tag that podcast for my leaders to listen to, because I think there's ways, and again, we can't always decide when a corporation gives you a goal what that looks like, but you
Mhm.
can take it and make it your own. You really can break it down, and then you can break it down further for your team so that everything that everybody does on a
Yeah.
daily basis drives towards that result.
I think I will definitely, I'm going to share it with you right after we got off this so you can
Okay.
see. But I think it's really going to land with you because the whole model of the talk is building smart goals and then using your core values to build the smart goals and then build the measurable KPIs at the end too. So that kind of goal setting follows the whole trend. And because we do every single goal we set for the company, every single person we hire, every single person we fire, is all because of the core values. Our reviews every quarter, every year are all based on our core values. So we tie them into all of the goals, which I think will really resonate with you and your listeners as well. So I'll definitely share that talk with you after this.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. I think it'll be very beneficial for them. Yes. I've got a couple of questions. Some are more leadership, some are more entrepreneurial because I have a
Yeah.
blend of listeners. So when we
Mm-hmm.
talk about leadership, what do you think is the biggest leadership myth that you've been able to debunk in yourself or others as you've grown? Like, what would you say the biggest thing is right now that you're focused on?
For me, the biggest thing that I've been able to debunk for myself is that a leader has to know all of the answers. This is an easy one for me to answer because I am constantly thinking about this. I started in management when I was 19 years old and had no clue what I was doing. I had no right being anybody's manager because I could barely manage myself. I didn't really manage myself. And but because I started in that type of leadership role so young, I really just thought that I knew everything. And it took, I'm 32 now, so it took a couple years for me to actually be able to like debunk that myth in my head and realize that I don't have all the answers, nor do I need to, because part of my job as a leader is to surround myself with people who do have the answers and then delegate as I need, and then I get to learn from everyone on my team as well. And we really built our company to, like, yes, I'm the owner of the company and yes, I'm the leader of all the people. There's really no way around that, but I've built it so that everybody feels like equals inside my organization. There's no like power dynamic or battle here because I am very open with the fact that I don't have all the answers, but Stacy does, or but Ivana can tell you how to do this. And I very loudly and proudly share that we are like a mosaic of that. We'll get you the answer somewhere inside our team. It's just a matter of who it comes from, and it won't always be me.
Yeah, and that you learn that at an early age is phenomenal because I see too a lot of leaders, they get to the point where say they've been there 3 years, 5 years, whatever, they're afraid to raise their hand and say, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know the answer to that, or I need help with this because I've
Mm-hmm.
never come across something like that. And that is something I've been trying to embrace. And we're going to be talking about, I have a new program coming out called Summer Soul Reset that's going to be specifically around
Ooh.
those types of things where you can't know it all. My attitude
Mm-hmm.
is when you know it all, your life is over. Like you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There you're here for a journey. You're here to learn, you're here to grow, you're here
Mm-hmm.
to make a difference. And when you're done, you're done. But I think saying that you don't need to have all the answers and bringing your if you have a team or even if you don't have a team, find colleagues that are
Mm-hmm.
like-minded and brainstorm with each other because sometimes, especially as an entrepreneur and a CEO, it can be very lonely at times. So when you get to bring in your team, you get to brainstorm, but you get to do it with
Mm-hmm.
other individuals. I know you're part of a mastermind. That's where some of the magic really happens, and you get some great ideas, but you find out, hey, I do know more than I think I know
Mm-hmm.
sometimes. So it's really
Mm-hmm.
cool.
I love that. Yeah. I will say if you don't have a team and you don't have people that you can kind of do that brainstorming session with or the resources that you can reach out to people in your team, I would strongly recommend going on like meetup.com or finding a mastermind or something so you can find people who are in a similar environment to you because community is the single hand like that's the secret sauce. I would not be here today doing this podcast, especially this podcast, if it weren't for my mastermind, because we met through a mutual friend who is in the mastermind with me. But just in general, in my business, I wouldn't be here where I am today if it wasn't for having those other minds that I could bounce things off of. And they set me straight when I'm on the wrong path or when I'm selling myself short. They hold me accountable. So community is really it for me.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. Even when I'm selling myself short.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So more entrepreneurial when you look back at your business, and it could be for leaders too, because I feel like even as leaders, you do hold a CEO position for the part of the
Mm-hmm.
business that you own. But when you look back, what do you think, Brittany, really what was that calculated pivot that pushed your business into where it is today? Because you're now a six figure territory, right? So I know there's so many people that would love to be there as entrepreneurs, but really growing your business. What do you say really was that pivot or that push, and what guided that leap for you?
So I'm going to give you a little bit of a long-winded answer if you don't mind.
Love it.
So right now, just so we kind of understand where I'm at now, my business is a dental specific consulting company. And more specifically than that, we help with the very specific software. So we help fine tune systems and operations for open dental software users. It's niche, like very much so. 5 years ago, this company that I created for myself was a natural soap business. So if we could just like the leap from one thing to the other is a small pivot, I would say. And really how I got from one point to the other, I think is important to share. So as I mentioned before, my best friend passed away unexpectedly from addiction. And she had had this natural like soap hobby and she was selling them at little craft stores and things like that. And when she passed away, I felt it was really important to honor her. And so I felt this like I don't want to call it a burden, but it call it what it is. I felt this like burden to carry on this thing that was important to her in her memory. I felt a lot of shame when she had passed away because I was the best friend and I didn't know she was having these issues in the first place. So I felt very much to blame for this. So I felt the need I had to carry the torch for her. And this was not in alignment with who I was. I was not like a crunchy person at this point in time. I kind of am now. So it did help me blossom and grow. But I had never made soap before. I'd never had any desire to do anything like this before. But I launched this business so that I could donate profits to addiction recovery centers and do these things to honor her, which was beautiful. I love that I took that on and I wanted to create this thing that could help people in her name. And I don't regret it for a single second, but it was 100% not for me. The first year in business, we were about 20 grand in the red. So I was losing money. I was working a full time job. So this was then taking up every minute of my spare time. It was taking up all of my money, all of my time. And I was really burning out at my day job already. And then I threw this thing on top and it was a mess. So to the actual question of like, what was a pivot that got you onto the successful path that I'm in now, was making the decision to do something that was in alignment with me, to actually take a moment and look at what I want in life and reevaluate my core values and reevaluate my why and where I want to be in 15 years and what life I want for my kids and what type of relationship I want with my husband, and then reverse engineer that. Like, what can I do that I love, that brings me joy, that doesn't make me a miserable person at the end of the day? And how can I build that into the legacy that I can leave and the thing that people are going to say about me when I leave? And it's was that specific pivot where it stopped being about everyone else and started being more about me, that the business took off. And even then it was kind of rocky at first because I was still trying to fit into this box that we were talking about of everybody else's version of what a dental consultant looks like. And then when I stopped caring what everybody else thought and just said, screw it, let's give it a try, 2 years ago was when I started to say, let's just be Brittany at work and see what happens. And the last 2 years have been the most successful, most profitable, most enjoyable, most wonderful 2 years ever. I have so much more time for my family. We go on vacations. I never went on a single vacation until I brought my family on one. It's just such a magical experience to be able to bring all of these experiences to life for my kids, and I mean for myself too. I like a vacation. So it wasn't until I started doing things for me and really defining my why that I was able to pivot from one thing to the next.
And think about the inspiration you are for your kids.
They will often say, Mom, are you almost done working? Like, I have to remind myself that they're 7 and 8, but when they're 27 and 28 and they're looking at their lives, that they will have seen something different and they know that they can try whatever they want.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I think that's the important part. And again, that's, why I do what I do, because I don't want women to go through what I
Mm-hmm.
went through. I want to help them see that there's something different. And I love that because back in the day when I took vacation because I love to travel. But part
Mm-hmm.
of it was because I just was so exhausted, because you usually work like a dog before you go on vacation to get everything in line, and then everything's waiting for you when you get back. So
Yep.
it didn't, 3 days in, you're like, did I just even have a vacation? Where
Yep.
now I think too, when you're an entrepreneur and you're authentic to yourself, not only do you show your best self, and it's your superpower, but I think you get to live that life. Like, you get to, because it's something that you enjoy doing, it's a passion of yours,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't feel like work. And literally I can take my laptop and I can go to Florida, which I just
Yep.
did, and I can work from there. I can work from the beach, which is what I was
Mm-hmm.
doing like 2 weeks ago. I was literally sitting on a beach. I had rented one of those little umbrella lounge
Mm-hmm.
chairs, and I was sitting there working, and it did not feel like I was working, but it was absolutely beautiful. And some of the most creative information comes out when you get to just pause and do
Mm-hmm.
that and just be. And I just, I think that is something that is beautiful that we get to do. So,
I
yeah.
agree.
But I would say that, the one thing, and you talked a little bit about it around the, when you look in the mirror and you have the conversation when you're with yourself, because I swear the most popular person in the world will still do that. Your Oprahs will still
Mm-hmm.
do that. Your speakers on stage, Simon Sinek still does it, right? We all have those is this the right message? Does it bring value? Right? We always will have those. That's just part of human nature. But when you talk about breaking cycles, because that was something that we talked about, what's a cycle that you've shattered recently, and how did it, when you shattered it, kind of what was the ripple effect into your business and personal life? Can you give us an example?
Yeah. So I can think of a big one, and it is more on the personal side, but I don't drink. That is a huge, and that's a relatively, like, I've never been a huge, that's not true. I haven't been a huge drinker in a long time. But a year ago, I decided that I was going to make the decision to just be completely sober all the time. And that has had this ripple effect, and it makes me kind of emotional because I know the things that I've seen and that I've been through because of alcohol and because of drugs. And my kid was goofing around the other day, and they were like pretending to be drunk, which was just nonsense in the first place, but they'd seen it in a movie, and they were doing such a bad job of what a drunk person would look like because they've never seen that. They don't know what it looks like. And that compose yourself. It's the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen in my life, because for the last 5 generations in both sides of my family, everyone has struggled with some kind of addiction. And making the decision that I don't need any of those crutches. And I think part of it is because I've built this life for myself that I don't need to escape from all the time. And I'm very blessed to have the opportunity to do that. But having built a life that is so completely undependent on substances that my kids don't even know what it looks like or what it even means to be these things is it's the win for me, really. And I also just have these incredible children, and like I'm constantly pouring love and affection into them. And like when I say things like, gosh, you are so funny, gosh, you are so amazing, they're like, both my kids would be like, yeah, I know. And I'm like, snaps to you, like I wish I had that when I was that young. So just the way that I'm raising my children in general, I think it's a huge cycle break. But the complete disconnect from substances, I think, is probably like the ultimate win. 7-year-old Brittany would be very proud.
I love that. I love that because that is something that is so personal and that you've
Mhm.
had to be live through, right? And I think everybody has their thing based on what's
Yeah.
happened in their life that it can be make such a big difference. So thank you for sharing that because that's very personal. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Okay, I've just got a couple of questions left because I know I could talk to you forever.
I know.
What's one, so for the leaders or the entrepreneurs that are listening, what's one real-time habit or ritual that you have every day in your life? And you may have shared it already, but feel free to share anything, but that feeds your resilience and clarity in what you do each day.
Mm. I know you said one. I'm going to share two.
Okay.
One is every single night I have dinner with my family. And during this dinner with my family, we go over the 3 best parts of our day. So we are very rooted in gratitude every day. And we do that at home, but it is a reminder for me every single morning when I start my day. Like, I am grateful for those 3 things yesterday. What am I going to watch for today to see what I'm grateful for? And it starts me in this mindset every day of being grateful. And I also have a morning huddle with my team every day. It's a 15-minute meeting at the beginning of every day where we talk about what our win was from the previous day. So, again, rooted in gratitude. We talk about our plan for the entire day so we know how we can cohesively work with each other and make sure that we're all showing up and holding each other accountable.
You just answered my second question that I had
Cool.
for you.
Overachiever.
Well, around, what does that look like for Brittany? Because a lot of times you leaders, and I know you can get caught up in it. I had to schedule in my calendar, and I've shared this with people, is you need to make time for your team as a leader. If you've got direct reports, you have to make white space for them. But
Mm-hmm.
that's genuine in listening and being there for them. I used to call them one-on-ones. I would schedule one weekly with each of my direct reports. It's a check-in. Sometimes it was business related, but at least once a month, it was solely focused on development or on them themselves, because I think, to keep people motivated and inspired, you always have to remember, well, what's in it for them. They're
Mm-hmm.
not just here to collect a paycheck. It's a big piece, but everybody has a reason why they picked that role, that company. And I think
Mhm.
we often forget that really quickly and make them feel like cogs in the wheels. And then we start to have cultural issues, right? So I think
Mhm.
that's a big one. And I love the piece around the gratitude. The question was going to be, what role has gratitude or self-compassion played in your journey, and how does it
Mm.
impact your business and your team? So so you answered it. But I think the gratitude is a big thing. Sometimes people feel like they have nothing to be grateful for, but you can always find something.
Yeah. Gratitude is one of our core values inside the business as well. So we have, like I said, we have a 15-minute huddle every day where we go through our win, our plan, we give client updates. At the end of every huddle, we have on our agenda sheet, we have a quote that embodies one of our core values. And then we talk about specifically how we're living into a core value. So everything is very like holistic and tied together throughout the entire business. Those core values are woven in a lot of different ways, but having gratitude as one of our core values, that's why it's so stinking important for us to start and end our days inside the business with that moment for gratitude.
So what are your business core values? Because I'm sure some leaders would love to grab a couple of the ones that you have.
Yeah. So we have efficiency because we want to just make like that's our whole business model is helping offices be efficient. So we want to live into that. We have accuracy. What we do is so detail oriented and can have a large ripple effect on the business that we're working with. So we want to make sure that we're accurate in every way we show up. We all strive for knowledge. So we are constantly learning. We're doing lots of CE and webinars and podcasts and all the things so that we can learn more from the people around us. We have authenticity, which we already talked about. We have gratitude. And I am missing one, integrity.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And I'm just pulling up, I have a final question for you, but let's talk a little bit about where listeners can find you, talk a little bit about your podcast, because I want to make sure that they can find you. I'm sure they're inspired by this conversation. So where can they get more, Brittany?
Yeah, so I made a rash decision in the beginning of the year to delete my Instagram, and then I did finally remake it, but we're like slowly but surely getting built back up. So if you want to come hang out with me, Instagram is definitely the place. That's where I spend most of my time. But I'm also on Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok, literally anywhere that you consume your social media, you can find me and hang out. The podcast is Dental Decoders, which is a dental specific leadership podcast. However, we do bring in guests who are outside of the industry. So if you're looking for a little bit of something different, definitely come check us out. We've got some really great guests on the show, and we're going through a rebrand right now. So, spoiler alert, there may be some different things coming next month.
Can't wait to hear about it. Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's where I got to meet you, I think, too, right? Was we were building our
launching.
podcast at the same time through the launch.
Yep.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Brittany, final question for you. And I ask everybody that every guest that comes online, what is the biggest thing you've learned throughout your journey that you can share with our listeners? It could be a valuable lesson, a transformation experience, or even a book that had a profound impact on your
Ooh.
professional growth.
You know, I was going one way until you said book. I read the book Radical Candor when I was in a book club, still employed at a job. And it led to so many, like a giant ripple effect of things happened in my life after I read this book. It was really giving me the permission to not have to like sugarcoat everything I say because I operated in an area of like too much empathy to where it was costing me and our company in the long run because I was being too nice all the time.
Yeah.
So reading that book, and we read it as a team, and we read all of our new hires read it as well. We have the audio book, so we're not really like reading it, but I have all our new hires consume the content from the book in some way as well because it's how we operate here is with radical candor, and just learning that I wasn't doing anyone any favors by trying to be nice all the time. I was hindering my growth and theirs was the biggest eye opener that I've had as a leader and will forever be on my book list.
I will have to do a podcast on that because I think difficult conversations, being in HR, I've unfortunately
Mm-hmm.
had to have a number of difficult conversations over my career with individuals, but people really struggle with that. And they sugarcoat it. And then I find when they actually sit with them again, the message wasn't clear.
Wasn't clear.
And so you've just done a disservice to them and you. And so how do you show empathy and compassion but still deliver the message, right, that you have to deliver? So I love that. I'm going to add that to the show notes so that people can find that. It's a great read. I love it too. Yeah. Actually, I might pull it out and listen to it again too. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks when I go for walks or when I'm going for longer drives. So yeah.
Giant audiobook nerd. So everything behind me, those are just shelf trophies for books that I've listened to.
Brittany, anything else that you want to share with our listeners before we end this episode?
I just want to issue a dare, kind of. I want to challenge anybody who may be listening to pick one tiny thing that they can do that makes them feel more authentically themselves in their workspace, and just see for a month what type of effect that can have on your overall well-being, as well as your work performance and the performance of those around you. Just give yourself permission to do one tiny little thing, and then find me on Instagram and report back in 30 days.
I love that. I want to hear too. So send both of us a message, and whether you set yourself a reminder on your phone or whether I used to stick little Post-it notes on my monitor at work of what my focus was. So make sure that it is something that you see every day, or maybe it's part of your affirmations and intentions at the beginning of the day and your gratitude at the end of the day. So love that. Love that challenge. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear what they have to say. So thank you so much for joining me. As always, a pleasure when I get to spend time with you. So really, truly.
Thank you again for having me. This was wonderful.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Thanks for tuning in to today's Balanced Leader. If you want to go even deeper, then visit my website at carolinebaird.com, find some free resources, and look at all the different ways that I can support you to become your best self. Remember, change begins with just one small step. It's those tiny actions that start you on the path to achieving your dreams and finding balance. And as always, life is an experience. So take a moment to enjoy the journey and appreciate the progress you make along the way. Until next time, keep taking those small steps, savor the journey, and lead with courage and authenticity. This is Caroline reminding you to stay bold, stay balanced, and keep moving confidently towards your dreams.